So there's something of a nefarious problem that can happen when you're creating a process model. So this is a very simple, very trivial example of a shipping process. We have someone who orders an item, we charge their credit card, we adapt for, the credit card not going through, we trigger the shipment, we track the shipment, and then we confirm delivery. In the real world, it's a lot more complicated than this, but this is enough to help me make my point. So great, we sit down with the customer, we model this process, everyone's happy, we've got consensus. How do we take this forward? How do we actually get started? Well, in my mind, you have to do sort of three things. It's sort of three dimensions to it. The first dimension is obviously the model. You've got to make sure you understand what the workflow is. Once you're done with that, the next thing that you have to understand, in my opinion, and I'll qualify this by saying that there are just as many people in the world who have the degree of expertise that I do, which is about 20 years in process modeling, who would disagree with what I'm about to say next. So a lot of very smart people would probably disagree with what I'm saying. That being said, I'm also one of the experts in this area, and I feel confident sharing my opinion. So in my opinion, after you're done with the process model, the next thing that you have to define is the data that's going through the system. So exactly how are we going to go from one system to another? What variables explicitly are we looking at in order to make a decision about, going left or right at a particular branch? What is the actual payload for this step and the other step and the other step? Because that information is going to define the sort of the relationship that this process diagram is going to have with the rest of the larger system. Now, in order to do that, the thing that you have to do is you have to reach consensus when you're, done with this process model and you want to talk to the rest of the organization, especially the IT guys. They're concrete people. They are engineers. They've been trained to solve concrete problems. They're very, very nice about the modeling and the naming conventions and all that stuff, but they want to know, what do you actually want me to build? So in order to solve that problem, what you have to do is you have to kind of agree on the semantic and the syntactical consistency of the data that's going through the systems. How do you do that? How do you make sure everyone's on the same page about it? I'm not aware of an excellent way that's built into Camunda to do that. So let me tell you what we did. We at CapBPM built a free open source plugin that actually allows you to show on the diagram what the data is that's going through each part of the system. Let me show you how it works. So basically what you do is that you go to the widget that you're talking about, let's say in this case the order item, and there's this really cool feature in there called the example output. So what you do is you go into the example output and you basically put in JSON. And the JSON indicates, hey, this is a sample of what I'm expecting. So what I really like about this is that once I've done this with this new plugin, you can actually come in here now and you can actually start to see, well, when I'm coming out of this order, this is the payload that's going from the order item system to, the gateway that decides whether this is a US-based system or not, right? So then how do you indicate, for example, what a cancel order looks like? Well, in my case, probably what we want to do when we cancel an order is pass in the transaction that we want to cancel. So I would come over here, I would expand this out, I would put in into its sample data over here. This is what I'm looking for. And then when I come over here, I can see, oh, I need the transaction ID. I'll roll that to the backend system. And then from there, this has enough information to do what it's trying to do. Now, what about something like charge the credit card? What do we actually need to do in order to be able to go to the next step over here? Well, we could actually come in and we could say, hey, what is the charge status? So when we're done with this, then, we're going to articulate out that the example data for this guy is this. And now we see what that looks like. And let's say for the sake of the shipping information, what we are really talking about for the example data is something like this, where now we can see what the order looks like. And let's say for the sake of confirmed delivery, we want to be able to say what are we actually going to be looking at? What is the payload in this particular step? So again, come over here. I'll put in some example data. And now, I kind of have a decent sense of the data that's going through this system at key point. I know what the order is going to look like. I know what I'm looking for when I invoke this charge credit card system. For example, I'm just looking for it to return a boolean. When I talk about an order over here, I know exactly what I'm looking for. So I know there's an example of, what this payload is supposed to be like. And then even when I have like order confirmation, I know that, I need to be able to see this information. The point of all of this is not, golly gee whiz, we build a widget. The point of all of this is that you have to solve the problem of what is the semantic contract between your BPM system and the backend systems that you're interacting with. And in order to do that, you cannot make that a purely technical exercise. For the same reasons that you need to draw the workflow and make sure that the business is aligned with what you're building, you need to make sure that the business is aligned with the data that's going back and forth between these systems. Let me give you a practical example. Over here, I've got this order, and this order has a lot of details in it. Now, it is completely reasonable to have a conversation with business and the IT team to say, look, I'm not really sure that we should have all of this data in the BPM engine as well as having it in the backend system of record. One, you've got then arguments about what is the source of truth. And two, potentially you've got gunk in the head of the BPM engine that it doesn't actually need in order to be able to do its job. Now, I'll probably put another presentation up about the reason that you don't want to do that sort of thing. But in general, what you want to be able to do is something that we in the software world call encapsulation. And basically what that means is that every one of your processes needs to have the minimum amount of information required for it to function, in the way that we actually need it to. So for example, over here, we've got a customer, we've got their name and their phone number and their email, their shipping address, all the items that are being shipped. Chances are good that we don't necessarily need all this information. We shouldn't really have her phone number unless there is a process that's going to be calling her. We really probably shouldn't have her email unless there's a reason for it. Now, if there is a reason for it, excellent. We can reach consensus here and we can make sure, hey, this information is here for this reason. That's fantastic. That's appropriate. But if you are not being transparent with your business partner in terms of being able to confirm why this data is there, why it's being shared, and how it's being used, then you're removing the business partner from the solution to some degree. And I think that way lies madness and demons and all the bad things that bite your ankles at night. So in my opinion, you are better off being able to articulate out what the data is that's going through the system. And with this visual representation, we are solving what I think is an important strategic problem. So this is a tactical solution, and like I said, it's a free open source plugin that you can pull in and use and modify and do all the things that you want to be able to do with it. We wish you health and wellness with it, but the tactical problem it's solving is not important. The tactical problem is how do you represent data. The strategic problem that it's solving is very important, and that is how do you reach consensus between business and IT in terms of what the data is that's going through the system. And more importantly, how do you move from that sort of step of defining the process to actually getting to a point where you're able to write stories and articulate what needs to be done and how the backend systems need to interact with each other. I think that illuminating this problem and the solution to this problem is a key tactic that you can use to solve that strategic problem. Okay, thank you very much. If you have any feedback, suggestions, if you want to help contribute to the code base, we'd love to have it. Please let me know what I can do to help.